The snow fell thickly and silently on New York that morning, as if someone from above wanted to cover the city with a white blanket so that no one would see its dirt. Edward Crane, the owner of an investment empire, sat in the corner of his office on the 87th floor, holding a cup of espresso that had cooled. He loved the morning hours, the silence, when no one was shouting into the phone, and the city looked as if it needed a minute to itself, too. He was 56, he knew the value of every minute. On the wall was a photograph of his steelworker father, who had always said, "Work clean, even if the world is dirty." Edward had long since convinced himself that he did. The door opened without a knock, the first time in 15 years. Sarah, the secretary and the most loyal person in the skyscraper, stood there as pale as paper. She placed the tablet on the table. Crane Investments under investigation. Offshore network, political contracts, fake charities. There are signatures. There are witnesses. The headlines ran like ghosts across the screen, repeating the same word, corruption. "That's a lie," Edward said. His voice sounded firmer than he felt. "Someone played a trick on us." "They have the documents," Sarah whispered. "Your signature is there, Ed, names, dates. Donations to senatorial campaigns. We gave to scholarships," he said. "To clinics. To veterans programs. You know." The phone rang. On the screen was Lauren, his daughter, a bioengineering student, a child with an inner compass that Edward had always respected. "Dad, tell me it's not true." Her voice was steady but cracked. "The campus is buzzing. They say you bought the solution." "I'll figure it out," he lied to himself and to her, trying to catch in his voice the same steadfastness that was in his father's eyes in the photo. While the lawyers were writing press releases, while security was blocking access, Michael Graves, co-founder, friend, business brother, entered the office. He looked like a man who didn't bring flowers, but wreaths. "Ed, this is a game of destruction," he threw a folder on the table. "Financial Inspectorate, prosecutors, Senate committee." Someone connected the threads. "And," he trailed off. "There's my letter in the leaks. In your name. What are you, Michael?" Edward felt something in his chest shift like metal from thermal shock. 5 years ago. I asked you not to get involved in that federal contract. Remember? Graves stared straight ahead. "If they're pulling my letter, it means there's an internal leak. One of our own." The wind beat against the glass. Below him, the city was like a chessboard, the pieces already in motion. Edward tried to stand straight, but he felt a void growing inside him like a black hole. "Have I crossed a line somewhere without realizing it?" his inner voice asked coldly. He turned off the tablet. His own face was reflected in the darkness of the screen, not that of a predator, but of a weary man who knew that a storm lay ahead that would spare no one. And yet he whispered to himself, "I won't give up. Even if I have to burn." The first blows came like a hail, accounts frozen, offices searched, cameras outside the house. Neighbors who had greeted each other yesterday turned away. "Justice has caught up with the billionaire," the talk show studios said. Lawyers advised silence. Advisors advised disappearance. For the first time in 20 years, Edward took the subway to feel the pulse of the city without black escorts, but instead he heard a whisper, "This is him, the same one." The car smelled of wet fur and takeout coffee, and the electronic scoreboard flashed with news about him, without the right to pause. "Ed, the Senate committee is preparing a subpoena," Sarah reported. "Anne. Michael isn't answering the phone. He's disappeared." "Are you sure?" "His office is empty. The assistant says, vacation without a return date." At the press conference, he took the podium, intending to speak honestly, even though there was a lump in his throat. The cameras winced with cold pupils. "I didn't buy decisions or hide offshore," he said. "Our funds are transparent, our audits are open. I will cooperate with the investigation." Mr. Crane, the tabloid reporter exclaimed, how do you explain the check to Senator Miller's campaign from your daughter's account, Green Echo LLC? He gasped. My daughter doesn't have an LLC. That evening, in the apartment that always smelled of sesame bagels and expensive candles, he found an envelope in the mail slot. No stamp, no return address. Just a single USB drive and a note, look at yourself from the side. On the flash drive was a series of scans, shimmy, company charters, chains of transfers, consulting contracts with zero content. And signed, Memphis Ledger, Private. Behind one of the charters was Lauren's real signature. Lauren E. Crane, Manager. His hands trembled. Lauren, he typed it immediately. Have you signed anything in the last few years? Has anyone been slipping me documents in my name? Dad, the silence on the other end turned to a rustle. Michael asked me to sign a form for a charitable foundation once. He said it would speed up grants for the lab. I didn't understand. Excuse me. Michael, he pressed his forehead against the cold glass of the window. When was that? 2 years ago. There was also a man in a gray coat who called himself the foundation's lawyer. They were in a hurry. They said you were busy and thanked me very much. Trust crumbled like plaster from an old wall. Michael disappeared. His daughter was drawn into the scheme. Photocopies of checks, correspondence with officials, even obscene memes with his face appeared in the media. The prosecutor's office secured the seizure of the yacht. His wife Julia, long since removed to another orbit, filed for divorce, demanding half. Worst of all, Lauren, bent with guilt, refused his calls. I don't want to see the news with my name on it, she wrote. And that same day, the Memphis Ledger came out with a lead article, Philanthropy as a Screen. How Crane Turned Charity into a Tool of Influence. The night summons became a report for questioning. In the entrance, the sour snow darkened under the agent's boots. Edward realized, he no longer controlled a single move. It was a breakdown, reputation, fortune, loved ones, hope, everything toppled like a Jenga tower at the last moment when a hand touches the forbidden bar. The underground corridor of the prosecutor's office smelled of dust, coffee, and fear. The interrogation dragged on for hours. The investigator, a thin woman with attentive eyes, asked questions as if she were peeling off layer after layer of paint from an old icon. Do you know the company, Green Echo LLC? Why doesn't your signature match the signature on the contract with the contractor? Where is Michael Graves? Ed's answers were even, polished, but inside he was growing tired, smelling of ashes. After the interrogation, he sat down on a cold bench in the common corridor, where the phones only whispered, and for the first time thought, maybe I really didn't notice how dirty my car was running while I thought it was clean. Nice speech at the press conference, said a voice on the left. A young man in a shabby jacket handed him a paper cup of coffee. I'm Aidan Holt, a reporter for the Memphis Ledger. So you're the one who set my house on fire, Ed said dryly. I'm the one who showed that there was dead wood in it, Aidan replied calmly. You have enemies, Mr. Crane. But the main thing is that there are other people's hands in your files. I didn't come to make fun of you. I came to make deals. They sat down in a corner of the cafeteria, where the yellow light made people more honest. Aidan pulled out a tablet and showed them something the DA didn't have yet, internal correspondence between Michael and the shady lobbying consultant, Helio Strategies. It was all there, the shell funds, the dummy directors, the transfer maps that laundered political donations through Green Echo LLC in Lauren's name because the daughter is a shield of sympathy. You think I did it? Ed asked quietly. I think you've lost control of the empire you built on quick decisions and trust in your own people, Aidan covered the tablet. And I think Michael is working out a plea deal with you, where you're the main demon. Here's a draft letter from his lawyer. If he turns you in, he'll get away with it. Why are you showing me this? You drowned me. Because I want a story, not a legend, he replied. A legend is just another fairy tale for the rich. History is blood and data. If you go all the way and give me everything, letters, meeting logs, the accountant's black notebooks, I'll go with you. I'll testify if I have to. I want the truth, even if it destroys you. And if the truth saves you, then it will be the best material of my life. Late that evening in the apartment, which already smelled of emptiness, Edward opened the safe. There were old notebooks there, not for the auditors, but for himself, who had asked, who had thanked, who had wanted acceleration. He wrote them down to remember who he had turned down and who he had told to think about it. Between the pages he found a note from 5 years ago, Michael plus Helios, Green Echo as a bridge. Risky. Shelved. E.K. The edge of the paper had been cut off, at the bottom were the initials of a person he had once hired and forgotten, S.L. Sarah Lee, he whispered. The secretary who saw everything. The next morning he went to Sarah's place not as a boss, but as a person on the edge. She listened, looked at the floor, considered. Finally she said. Michael brought an envelope that day and asked me to change your schedule so that you could take a break. You were on a business trip. He brought the fund lawyer, the one in the gray coat. They looked for your signatures in old contracts, compared them, trained their hand. I kept quiet because I believed they were for grants. And then I saw the Helios seals. And I was scared. Can you testify? She closed her eyes. Yes. Even if it breaks me. At the end of the day, Aidan sent him an archive, a hidden Helios memorandum for Michael, strategy, Barry E.K., through an ethics scandal, seize control. It turned his world upside down. It wasn't an enemy who betrayed, it was a brother who betrayed. My own man was writing the script for his downfall in order to take over the company. In the margins, someone had written, when he falls, we will become the moral choice for the market. Ed sat in the dark for a long time without light. And then he dialed the prosecutor's office and said, I'll come with the documents. And with the names. The Capitol hearing room was white and cold, like an operating room. On the other side were cameras, senators, and an audience with eyes searching for blood. Edward sat next to the lawyer, but he had moved away. He had come not to bargain, but to testify. Sarah, pale, determined, clasped her hands. Aidan, on the other side of the press area, was unblinking. Michael entered with a smile honed by PR professionals, sadness, sympathy, a hint of fatigue. Ed felt a hollowness in his stomach, but he held on. Today was all or nothing. Mr. Crane, the senator began, are you willing to swear that you didn't know about Green Echo LLC? I am willing to swear that I was used, he replied, and that I helped them by turning a blind eye to the small compromises that had become a system. And who is this, they? Edward looked straight at Michael. My partner. And Helios Strategies. I'm handing over to the committee correspondence, draft agreements, internal reports, notes of negotiations. And a witness who will confirm the forgery of signatures. Also, my personal notebooks. There are the names of politicians who were approached with acceleration and might know. The noise swept through the room like a gust of wind. Michael tilted his head, but his usual smile still played on his lips. Mr. Graves, the senator said, do you have anything to add? I will add, Michael confidently took the microphone. I will add that Mr. Crane has betrayed the ideals on which we built the company. All these papers are the despair of a drowning man who is dragging others to the bottom. Green Echo is his idea. No, Sarah said, standing up so suddenly that the chair clattered. That's a lie. I was there when you and the fund lawyer were learning to copy his signature. I saw the Helios seal. You called Lauren the Shield. Who are you two? I'm the one who brought you coffee for 15 years and saw more than you thought. Her voice cracked, but there was steel in it. I'm under oath. Aiden stood up, asked to speak as the author of the investigation. I have a Helios memorandum, where your team plans to put Mr. Crane under investigation to restore market confidence. There are digital traces of your lawyer, metadata of edits, IP addresses. I'm passing this on to the Secretariat. The hall breathed differently. Michael momentarily lost his mask, the look of a beast that sees a trap it thought was someone else's. At that moment, Edward felt that he was not alone standing on the edge of the abyss. The decision was simple and terrible: either negotiate for relief, or go all the way, giving up everything, even what he considered intimate, his notebooks with refusals and weaknesses, with his own compromises. I will not ask for immunity, he said into the microphone. I did not come for amnesty. If my mistakes are crimes, I will bear responsibility. But I did not launder money or by decisions. I allowed others to do it in my name, and that is also a crime. Today I am putting the truth on the table. Let it cut through the flesh. The senator motioned for the secretary to accept the materials. At that moment, there was no billionaire or senator in the room, only a middle-aged man who had decided to put himself under the sword. Michael tried to leave, but the marshals blocked his way. The cameras caught every breath. For the first time in a long time, Edward felt something strange. Fear had receded, and in its place came stubbornness, the kind that had once been in his father's eyes in the photo. Spring in New York came not with warmth, but with transparency. The case was divided, some of the charges were dropped, some were transformed into fines, and for some compromises, Edward received a suspended sentence and a ban on managing public companies for several years. Helios crumbled under searches. Michael was indicted for conspiracy and fraud. Aiden wrote a series of materials where there were no heroes, there were people, mistakes, and choices. Lauren came to her father not in the office or the penthouse, but in a small rented workshop in Brooklyn, where he helped volunteers fix 3D printers for prosthetics. You really didn't know? She asked, holding a plastic palm in her hands. I knew that I only saw what I wanted to see, he answered slowly. And for a long time I thought that this was honesty, to close my eyes and believe my own. I was wrong, Lauren. They made you a horror story. But when I signed that document, I could have asked more too. She sighed. We are both guilty in our own way. He smiled for the first time without bitterness. The smile was stingy, but genuine. You know, my father used to say, cleanliness is not a status, it's a job. I thought cleanliness was when you don't get caught. In fact, it's when you're willing to give everything for the right not to lie to yourself. In the evenings they would sit on the roof and watch the city lights come on. He no longer owned the towers, but he had the time and the hands. His former partners bought new costumes for old roles. The market, as always, forgot faster than it learned. But someone had a memory. Edward wrote letters to his employees, apologizing for the layoffs that had fallen on them in the storm. He gave speeches in schools, where he spoke not about success, but about boundaries that were better not to be crossed. Can you be rich and honest? Lauren asked. You can be honest and sometimes rich, he replied. But if honesty depends on wealth, it's not honesty. What's more important, truth or success? Success without truth is just applause in the dark. It doesn't illuminate anything. He didn't become a saint or win back his crown. But he learned to sit in silence when his smartphone went silent, and to understand that silence is also an answer. When the trial ended, the judge said a phrase that stayed with him like a scar: You are not a monster, Mr. Crane, you are a man of great opportunity who has forgotten that opportunity is also a responsibility. The sentence hurt more than the fines. One day he came to an old steel mill that had been converted into a veteran center. The smell of oil, the hum of cranes, and hot metal brought back his father's voice. Work clean, even if the world is dirty. Edward placed his hand on the cold beam and whispered. You can't buy back the past with money. But you can stop borrowing from the future. Can you buy back the past? Maybe not. You can only live so that each next step doesn't require another legend. In the dark sky over Brooklyn, stars twinkled coldly, the same ones his father had seen over the steel mill, and the same ones that would shine when Edward Crane's name was forgotten. They asked no questions, but the answer in their brilliance was simple: success is fleeting. Truth is long. And if you ever weigh truth and success on the scales, remember, choice makes you rich or poor long before bank accounts.